Good evening. Welcome to Building a Great Resume. Thank you for attending and being here with us. We appreciate you. We appreciate you taking your time and effort to be here with us this evening. We will get started. So again, you're on the webinar, Building a Great Resume, and in partnership with Westlake Financial Wellbeing Center and Goshen. So thank you so much for being here. So just want to give you a few housekeeping rules. You're currently muted and your video is turned off, and the webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature, and all questions will be answered after the webinar. The questions will be answered even during the webinar if possible, but they definitely will make sure that all the questions are answered after. Once the guest speaker is finished, there's a post-test link. And so when you register, you answer a couple of questions, and we appreciate that. So what we want to do is provide a post-test as well. And this is just a post-assessment. There will be a link in the chat box, so please don't leave once our great speaker starts speaking. We want you to take the post-test. Please put your first name and last name in that post-test, answer the questions, and just hit submit. Once we receive all the post-test assessments, we are happy that you are here, and we would love to give you one of our raffles, one of our gift cards, that we are raffling off. And then just to let you know, we collect and maintain your registration information, and we don't provide it to anyone else. We just use it to provide communication with you in terms of our future webinars. And for those of you who are new to the Financial Wellbeing Center, just wanted to let you know that we provide free services to the community in 32805. So, of course, we do these financial webinars. We do a financial webinar usually every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, depending on the webinar. We provide virtual financial counseling and coaching sessions to you. We have resources for job placement, career resources, and community resources. So our telephone number is there on the screen. Please feel free to reach out and contact us if you have questions about anything related to finance. You can definitely provide information or community resources that we have. My coworker, Latricia Holt, will love to help you. By the way, those of you who don't know me, I apologize. My name is Denise Smalls, and Latricia and Denise, we work at the Westlake Financial Wellbeing Center. And so tonight we are providing a great webinar on building that wonderful resume, and you are receiving that from Stephanie Edwards. She has 20 years of experience in HR operations, recruiting, training, change management, strategy, corporate culture, coaching, and leadership development, and earned her master's in human resources at Rollins College in Winter Park in 2012. She has a demonstrated track record of success in creating and delivering programs that enable organizations to translate business goals into people strategies and tactics. Stephanie is dedicated, passionate, and persistent, and strives to bring the best of herself every day. She believes that the most important role she has is to be a coach and mentor to others on their journey to realize their personal and professional dreams. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Stephanie, who's going to provide wonderful information about building a perfect or a wonderful resume. And if you have any questions, please remember to put those in the Q&A. We appreciate you, and I am going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Denise. I appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here this evening to share building a great resume. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself personally, because when I was asked by the Growth SHRM organization to provide support and on these sessions, it is something that I'm actually going through myself right now as a part of COVID and the impact that it had on the casual dining restaurant industry, which is the industry that I was working in. My role was eliminated. And so this is information that's very relevant to me, and I've learned a lot throughout my career search journey over the past couple of months as I continue to search and for my next job opportunity. So I was really excited to be able to take what I've learned and some of the experiences that I've had along the way and be able to put that into words and into a presentation that I could share with others to hopefully help you as well. And so this is a first of a 4-part series, and we will jump right into building a great resume. So the first thing I want to do is really just define what a resume is. And when I say define it, we all know that a resume is a document that's created by a person to present their background, skills, and experience. But what I would argue is that a resume is really a marketing tool. And this is a tool that a job seeker is going to use as they're looking for employment. So when I think about like all the advertising that you see through TV commercials or on social media, what is that advertising trying to do? It's trying to sell a product, right? And the advertisers are telling you all these wonderful things about their product and why you should buy their product. And the reality is that's what a resume is for you. You are a product, and what you're trying to do is sell yourself to an organization. You're going to try and provide somebody who looks at your resume with all this wonderful information about you and showcase why you should be the one that they select for their organization. And so when you think about it in that terms, you really are wanting to make sure that you're highlighting all the really great things that you've experienced along your journey, whether it's employment experiences, volunteer experiences, school experiences, and really using the right words and the right formatting in that document to really sell yourself. So you get past the professional screening process, which in many cases, the first step in the professional screening process is done by a computer. It's not even done by a human. So it's really important that you have the right information in your resume, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk a little bit about some do's and don'ts. So first, the first do is that you want to make sure that you have a really great template. You want to select a template that you're going to use, and there's tons of ways that you can get a template. You can ask a friend for a template who may have a great resume template. You can look on Microsoft Word. Most of us are going to build our resumes in the Microsoft Word Office package. And when you go into their templates, you can type in chronological resume, and it'll give you a few different templates that you could select from. In addition to that, you can always do an internet search. You can find anything on the internet. Lots of free resume templates out there. My recommendation would be is to use one of the job boards. And the one that I've had the most success with is Indeed. And I'll show you a little bit later in the presentation where you can find some resume templates on the Indeed website. Once you have a great template, then you're going to want to make sure that you're using a font that is standard and consistent throughout the entire document. So when you get into Microsoft Word, there is, kind of the most common fonts that you'll see. Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman. Those are really easily readable fonts that are very common and will be picked up in any system, because what's going to happen is you're going to upload your resume when you apply for a job, as some of you may already know, into an applicant tracking system that the company that you're applying with uses. And if you try to use a font that's fancy or in script or that looks really neat, the challenge you might experience on the back end that you won't even know about is that once it gets translated from the applicant tracking system, when a hiring manager pulls it off their website, it might be a little bit unreadable. So the simpler the better. And then again, use that same consistent font throughout the entire document, because you want the document to be as clean and crisp and readable as possible. And there will be things that you're going to want to highlight in your resume. So there's ways to manipulate the font by bolding or making it larger in size or maybe underlining. There's tons of different ways that you can differentiate certain sections or certain parts of your resume, but you always want to keep it very standard. And you'll see that throughout our time tonight with the example resume that I have prepared. Next is that you want to also use simple standard bullets when listing accomplishments. Again, a solid circle or a solid square, something again that's easily readable and very simplistic, so it continues to maintain that clean, sharp image of your resume. You want to use strong key words when describing your experience. It's very important in your resume that you take ownership for the work that you did. Now, the reality is that in many times we're working on teams and we might not be totally responsible for everything that happened on a project or for some of the work that we created. But that doesn't negate the fact that you were also personally doing part of that work and you had responsibilities. So you want to use the right verbs like led, demonstrated, organized, that are in a very firm tone, so it showcases and highlights your ownership for the work that you performed in the roles that you were in. And then the last thing is you want to avoid any graphics, images, or tables in your resume. Again, simple is better. Like I mentioned earlier, your resume is going to be uploaded into an applicant tracking system. And in many cases, those systems won't recognize graphics, images, or tables. And so that's going to come in and it's going to muddy what your resume looks like when someone on the back end goes to print it off their applicant tracking system. So that covers the do's and don'ts. So what I'd like to do now is show you an example of a resume. And I'm going to look really quickly to see if there's any questions. I don't see any yet. So this is a really great example of a very clean resume. You'll see at the top, like I mentioned, you can see a standard font is used throughout this resume. If you look at the margins on the top and the bottom, as well as the sides, everything is very standard and symmetrical. I've got the different sections that are highlighted by bolding and putting the font in all capitalization. In addition to that, you see the name at the very top, right? It's bolded. The font size is much larger than the rest of the document because you want to highlight your name. And then as you go through the rest of the document, you'll see other places where I've either used all caps for certain things or bolded out certain things. So again, it's drawing the eye and the attention of the potential employer to see the things that are going to be most important as they're reviewing your resume and how your resume might align with the job description of the job that you're applying for. So now let's move into what kind of the resume sections might look like. There are typically 4 standard resume sections, and I'm also going to talk about a couple others that you might want to add if you have really relevant information to put in that. But sometimes less is more on a resume. You want to have enough information where the hiring manager can get a really sound information about what you have experienced and the skills that you bring to the table, but not so much where it's muddy and they get lost in the content and isn't really showcasing in a concise way your skills and experience. So the first section that's going to be really important is name and contact information, then a summary statement, then professional experience and education. And I'm going to break down each and every one of those sections for you. And it looks like I have a question. So maybe 1 or 2. It's a really great question. What I will say is the resume can be as long as you need for it to be, to highlight and showcase all of your experience. I will tell you my personal resume, I spent 23 years at one company, but I had a lot of job moves throughout those 23 years. And while I didn't need to highlight every single experience, some of it is relevant for certain jobs that I've applied for, and I needed it to be all encompassing, which has made my resume 3 pages. But again, it's all about making sure you have enough information out there to showcase the experience. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by looking at the job description and kind of trying to match your resume as much as possible to the job that you're applying for, and why that might be important as we move throughout the course of our time tonight. So let's see, looks like I've got another quick question. Oh, just a thank you. You're welcome. So the next thing that I want to do is we'll talk a little bit about each one of the individual sections of the resume. And we're going to start with the name and contact information. So the name and contact information should be the very first section. You want to make sure it's highlighted at the top. And again, you'll see that I've got the name really bolded and in a large font size. So it's very easy to highlight that in your resume and see who you are and who's going to be applying for this position. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to move down throughout the different components of your personal information. So second component would be your physical address. And here's what I'll tell you. There's many times where people have a physical home address, obviously where they live, but maybe they get their mail at a P.O. box. What I will tell you is that in this day and age, it's highly improbable that a company is going to reach out to you through the mail, right? They're going to typically call you, or more likely, they're going to email you. So even if you don't receive mail at your physical home address, you still want to make sure that you have your physical home address listed on your resume as the address on record. And the reason being is because sometimes, believe it or not, P.O. boxes can send a message to potential employers that you might not have roots in the community, or you might be more kind of passing through the community that you're in. And as a result of that, employers might pass on your resume because they want people who are going to stick around, right? Employers are always looking to make sure they have low turnover in their work environments. And when they hire you and they spend the time training you, they want you to stay. And so as a result of that, it's really important that you have your physical home address. Again, even if you don't receive mail there, because it's highly unlikely that someone would send you mail to that address. The next thing that you're going to highlight is your telephone number. And you want to use the phone number that you most commonly answer the phone. So some of us have home phone numbers. I know I do, but I never ever use it. I only answer my cell phone. So my cell phone is what I'm going to use as part of my resume information, because that's the device that I always have on me and more likely to answer. And then next is email address. So again, this is the most common way that potential employers are going to reach out to you. And so you want to make sure that you've got your email address listed. And what I will also share about your email address is sometimes, folks have email addresses that they've created from long ago that might have acronyms in it, sometimes maybe inappropriate words in it, or just be very casual, like number1magicfan@gmail.com. And so I would tell you that if you have a really casual email address, get out on Gmail or Yahoo or wherever, create a new email address and utilize that email address for any jobs that you're going to apply for. It could be just as simple as a combination of your first name, middle name, last name, or just first and last name, and then @gmail.com or @yahoo.com. Keep it simple, and again, very easily identifiable to you. And then always, of course, make sure that you're checking that email account after you've applied for jobs, because again, that's typically where you're going to get confirmation that they know you've applied, as well as any other correspondence that you might receive from that potential employer. The last thing I have listed here is your a LinkedIn URL. Here's what I'll tell you is that if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, I highly recommend you create one. This is just another tool that potential employers will use to search you once you've applied for the position. I can tell you that in all the jobs that I've applied for over the last few months, and it's been probably 100, that I have always get a ping on my LinkedIn profile that somebody from that company has viewed my LinkedIn profile. Because what you can use your LinkedIn profile for is to give more information about yourself and to tell more of your story in a different setting and in a different way versus cluttering up too much information on your resume. Your resume should just be the very fundamental and core things that you want to talk about. But then in LinkedIn, you have ways to highlight your volunteer experience in a different way. You have ways to get recommendations from people that you've worked with or mentors or peers or friends that will be able to tell kind of a story about you and why you're so awesome. And so LinkedIn is a really great tool. If you don't have one, get one. And I would say I'm happy. I would love it if you want a great example. I had a lot of help building my LinkedIn through a job coach, and you can certainly take a look at mine and see how I built mine. This is actually my LinkedIn profile. I just wanted you to see where you get that URL from. So basically, once you create a LinkedIn profile, you'll go to the very top, you'll click on your profile. You'll see right here, I've got my little mouse arrow here. You'll click on you and it'll have your picture. And then once you click on your own profile, it brings up the web address for your specific LinkedIn profile. So that's what you would just cut and paste into your resume. So again, it's another way that employers can find you and get more information on you and your skills and your abilities. So now let's talk about the summary statement. So the summary statement is really meant to be a 3 to 5 sentence paragraph that's going to really introduce somebody to who you are in your total world of work. This is all the experience that you've combined over your years of working in the workforce. And what you want to be able to do is highlight the things that are most important and that are key. It provides a summary of your qualifications, and in many cases, you can also include some really good core skills and competencies, which are your soft and your hard skills that can become easily transferable to skills that you're going to be looking for from a new job perspective. You could also pepper in some key accomplishments. If there's something that was major or significant or a game changer that you really want to highlight in your summary experience, you can. In many cases, however, the key accomplishments are better reserved for highlighting in the position that it is associated with down in your position experience, which we'll talk about next. But if you see that as you see this summary of experience, a couple things that I'll point out. Just the first sentence, a highly collaborative and dedicated administrative coordinator with extensive experience supporting executive leaders, managers, and a regionally diverse team. So there's a couple things that I'll share with you. Remember I said keywords are important and really strong key verbs that show ownership in the work that you did. So collaborative. Collaborative is a soft skill. That's really important to potential employers for any job because they want to know that you work well with others and that you can collaborate with others. Dedicated. So this shows that you're loyal and that you are dedicated to the work that you do. Extensive experience supporting executive leaders, managers, and regionally diverse teams. As someone who's looked at a lot of resumes and hired a lot of people in my career, that to me tells me that this person has probably a high level of business acumen and a high level of professionalism, because if they're supporting executive leaders, that's typically what you need. In addition to that, you're also probably used to working kind of a fast-paced environment, because sometimes executive leaders can be a little needy, and you were able to kind of manage and juggle all of that throughout your experience. And you see just some other really great things. Has a demonstrated track record of success in tracking and monitoring project schedules and budgets. So those are more hard skills, that you're managing a budget, that you're kind of tracking schedules, etc. So again, 3 to 5 sentences highlights your total body of work and the experiences that you've gained over the course of your entire employment career. Next is about employment and professional experience. And so the things that you'll see here is first, you want to begin with the most current position that you hold. So it could be the one that you're in right now or the last position that you've held. And then you're going to add additional positions below that in reverse chronological order. So and you should include the last 10 years of experience that you have on your resume. Now, if you don't have 10 years of experience working in the workforce, that's okay. Then just put however much experience that you have, and that's perfectly fine. And then when listing the information, you're going to do it in a certain order. So the first thing that you'll see is you're going to list the company with the location that the company is in, city and state. Then below that, you're going to list what your position title was, and then the years of employment in which you held that position. Below that, next, you're going to have the opportunity to create a brief paragraph that's going to provide an overview of your position responsibilities. It's almost like if you had a job description for your job and that really articulated and described your day-to-day or your week-to-week kind of the tasks and responsibilities that you had. That's where you're going to capture in this section of your resume. And it's really meant to highlight kind of the high-level things and show the scope of your role, okay? When you have an opportunity to put any numerical qualifiers in this section, do so, because that's really going to allow potential employers to see what the total scope of your position was. And so as you look at this example, provided administrative support to a training team, which consisted of a director of training and 9 training managers. So what that's telling a potential employer is that you provided support to 10 people. Again, as someone who's looked at a lot of resumes, what I would say is that's telling me you're organized. You can juggle a lot of things because providing administrative support to 10 people is a big task. That you're probably easy to work with and very communicative. And so that's sending signals without actually saying certain things. And that's why it's important to have numbers in there. So if you had to manage a budget, what was the size of the budget? If you led a team, how big was the team? How many people were on the team and what were their positions? So it just helps people understand what the full scope of your role is. Then below that, you're going to use this next section to highlight any key accomplishments that you might have done or key responsibilities, like standing things that you were personally responsible for that were important to the organization and that they were big things that really made an impact on the company. And as I mentioned earlier, it's all for both of these sections, super important that you're using strong key verbs that highlights your ownership. So when I look at even the top paragraph, if I go back to the top paragraph, provided is a strong word. So it's showing your ownership. And then below that, you'll see every one of those bullets has a strong verb to lead off that statement. Managed, provided, served, organized. So always make sure that you've got a good strong verb that showcases what you did and what your key accomplishments were. And then when I see the things that are highlighted here on this one example, provided facilitation support for strategic team project meetings. So now this person is saying, hey, I was a training coordinator, but guess what? I also facilitated, which again is going to tell a potential employer, well, they're probably a good communicator. If they had to facilitate in an environment, then they're probably got good communication skills. And again, they're probably personable if they're going to be facilitating something. Served as a training point person by providing administrative support on all onboarding, in-restaurant training, and Orlando leadership session to 500 to 600 managers annually. Again, you notice the numeric values that are added there, and then you're talking about, hey, I was a point person for all of these people. So again, it shows your ability to prioritize, organized, be detail-oriented, as well as very communicative, and probably somebody that's patient and empathetic because you're dealing with a lot of people on an annual basis. So that really is all about your professional experience. And again, you're going to perform that same exercise for every single position that you've held throughout your career journey, up to the last 10 years. Again, you can include more if you want, but at minimum, if you have at least 10 years professional work experience, that's what you should include in the resume. And then the other thing that I'll say as it relates to this information is, number one, you should avoid using any company-specific acronyms or jargon, because somebody looking at your resume might not know what that means. And I can give you a perfect example in my previous experience. I worked a lot with our directors of operations, who in my world we referred to as DOs. I never called them directors of operations. But on my resume, I would not put a DO, because that might not be intuitive to somebody who didn't work in the industry that I did. And if I'm applying for a job outside that industry, they're not going to have any idea what that means. And the more a potential employer has to think about what you're meaning and what the message that you're trying to send, it could mean the less likely you are to get your resume flagged to move forward in the process. So you want to make it, as simple, as clear as possible, so anyone could understand what you did and what your experience was. So now that you have all that information, what I will tell you is I would say that it's important to always look at like your resume and have a base resume. Okay. And then once you have a base resume, as you start applying for positions, what you're really going to want to do at that point is take a look at the job descriptions for the positions that you're for. And you want to look at what the job responsibilities are, as well as the experience that the employer would like for the candidate to have in order to be considered as a strong candidate for the position. And where possible, you want to weave that language into your resume. Okay, and that's where your resume could become more personalized to specific positions. So you might have 2 or 3 versions of your resume, depending on the kinds of jobs that you're looking for. I have 2 or 3 resumes, whether I'm looking for a role that's more focused on learning and development versus focused on more HR generalist, because I know that those jobs require a different specific skill set, and there's something that the employer might be looking for. I have all of that skill set, so it's easy for me to take things out and put different things in so I can highlight that and make it match more of the job description and the job responsibilities. What I would say with a caveat to that is, right, never misrepresent your experience on your resume, just to try to tailor your resume to with the job responsibilities and the experience that the employer is looking for. Because once you do that, if you get into an interview and you have to answer questions about that and you don't have a great answer, you're going to send a signal to that employer, that potential employer, that you've misrepresented yourself, which obviously would not be good. So always make sure that if you make modifications to kind of align it with the job description, that it's still a very accurate representation of your skills and your experience. And that covers the professional experience section. Next, we'll talk about education. And so similar to kind of listing your position experience in reverse chronological order, you're going to do the exact same thing for your education. You're going to begin with your most recent education that you've achieved. You're going to, as you can see here, you're going to first list the university or the institution where you attended schooling. You're going to list the city and the state. So where's the location? Where was it at? And then below that, you're going to list the degree that you achieved and the year in which you achieved it. And that's really all you need to have in this section for each one of your educational experiences. With that said, if you had some really great accomplishments in your schooling, let's say you had a 4.0 GPA, you graduated magna cum laude, Maybe you belong to a club where you were president of that club. So you're showing that you were in a leadership organization and in a leadership position when you were in school, which shows your ability to not only do great in school, but also have extracurricular activities along with your schooling that shows your ability to multitask. It shows your work ethic, etc. It sends different cues and signals to a potential employer. So you could certainly include that information as well, but this would be your base information. What I would also say is that if you haven't completed a college degree, but maybe you've taken some coursework towards a college degree, well, you can also articulate that in your resume under the education section, just in a different way. I would still have the name of the university or the institution where I went to school, city and state, and then below that, you can put that you have taken college courses towards X degree, and then put the information of the years in which you took that coursework. So on this example, instead of having AA Business Administration 1984, I would replace that. If I hadn't completed my AA, I would replace that with completed coursework towards a business administration degree from 1982 to 1984. So that gives you another way to just highlight you have had some different schooling experiences. If you don't have any college experience, then you can utilize your high school information. So very similar, the high school you went to, city and state, and then if there was a certain track that you took in high school, then you could utilize that here as well. Or you could just put general education and the year that you graduated from high school. If you don't have a high school degree, but you have a GED, same thing. You're just going to put your GED information and when you achieved that GED. Looks like I have a question. Suppose you have a degree, but you've never actually worked in an area to utilize it. Do you still list it on your resume? Absolutely. Because it's more important that employers see that you've completed education versus that, and you have that educational experience in your background versus not. I will tell you, one of my degrees is in operations management, and I've never used anything in the operations management field. My other side of my degree is organizational behavior, which is essentially human resources, and I've used all that, but I list both because it's also showcasing that I was a double major, which again sends cues and signals to potential employers, which is positive, and you want to highlight that. So that covers your education experience. And these are really the 4 key sections of a resume that you're going to want to have on your resume document. Now I'm going to review a couple other sections that you can include should it be relevant to the job that you're applying for, and should you have experiences that or skills that you want to highlight because it could be really important and showcase a different experience level that you might bring to the table. And so first would be skills and certifications of your bonus sections of your resume, so to speak. And the professional skills and certifications is really going to enable you to just showcase additional skills that you have acquired through your previous work experiences or certifications that you might hold that would be relevant to the role that you're applying for. Almost every industry or work discipline has some kind of a certification that you can achieve. And so if you have one and you feel like it's relevant, then highlight it for certain. For example, if you're looking for a job in the construction field, there's certainly a construction certification. If you're looking for a role in as an administrative professional, there's certifications that are associated with that. In human resources, for example, there is a professional human resources certification that if I had one, I'd list that on my resume because it's important and it's very relevant to jobs that I would be applying for in the human resources field. What you see highlighted here is an expert in Microsoft Office Suite, proficient in PeopleSoft human resources software, because as you recall, the person was a training coordinator and is likely then potentially applying for jobs in the human resources field. that is also going to be administrative in nature. And so they're showcasing and calling out to potential employers, hey, I've got expert experience on all the systems that I would need to support a team in a training or in an HR functional area. And in addition to that, I also know how to navigate a human capital software, which is PeopleSoft. That's exactly what it is. So even if that company doesn't use PeopleSoft, they can have confidence that you've used some kind of system, and they will infer or deduce that you could translate that into whatever system that they utilize within their organization. In addition to that, I will tell you that if you are fluent in another language, you absolutely should have that, a professional skills and certification section, and you should list that on your resume. There are numerous jobs that I have seen and job descriptions that I've seen where it actually says, hey, this a preferred experience is that somebody is bilingual or multilingual, or they're proficient in Spanish. So it's very commonplace, and it's very, that could be a tipping point for you on why you get called in to actually move forward in the process versus another candidate that doesn't have it. And that's really what you're trying to do, as I mentioned at the beginning, is you're trying to sell yourself and put all the things out there that make you come across as the way better candidate than the 100 other people that have applied for this position. And that's why it's really great to have this section on your resume and highlight anything that you feel might be relevant. I have another question. What do you do when you have a degree in process? That's a great question. So I would put on there the university that you're attending, as well as the city and state, and then put taking courses or working on my business administration degree, estimated graduation date, 2022. So you can then just put in the estimated graduation date. And so again, it showcases similar to what I described with not when you hadn't completed the degree, it's I'm completing coursework towards this degree and my estimated graduation date is X. Really great question, and definitely highlight that on your resume for sure. All right, moving on to the last section that could be really great should you have relevant information to put there, and that's about affiliations. And affiliations can be a lot of different things. So it can be professional networking groups that you belong to either within the organization where you work or outside of the organization where you work. And in addition to that, any volunteer organizations that you are affiliated with. And when I say volunteer organizations that you're affiliated with, it doesn't mean that you go every week or every month. Maybe you go 3 times a year, but you're still volunteering. You're still giving back to your community. And so many companies, volunteerism is really important. Maybe you volunteer at your church. Maybe you lead a group at your church. You should highlight things like that in your resume. And again, you'll want to put, similar to all the other things that I've shown you so far, you'll highlight the organization that you're affiliated with, or the networking group that you're associated with, city and state, and then whatever position it is or whatever you do within that organization. And maybe it's just a member, right? Maybe you just go to meetings and you're there and it's a networking opportunity for you. That's fine. So I would put member instead of putting workforce readiness committee volunteer. Again, Second Harvest Food Bank. Maybe you just go 2 or 3 times a year and you volunteer, and that's it's important to just highlight these things. So again, you're showcasing different parts of yourself. You're giving a glimpse for future employers or potential employers on all of the things that you do, not only inside your work environment, but some of the things that you might do outside your work environment to further elevate yourself and to further improve your skills and to potentially give back to your community as well. And so that's really a great way to, again, highlight different things, because now it's signaling to potential employers that you're just not going home every night and sitting on the couch binge watching TV, that you are also doing other things that are really important and show different sides of what leadership skills or soft skills that you might bring to the table. So this takes us back to the complete resume. So again, we've walked through kind of all the different sections of the resume, and you've seen kind of how you put it together and some of the information that is important to keep in the resume. So now let's walk through some frequently asked questions. First is, should I include references on my resume? I get that question a lot, and the answer is no. Do not include references on your resume. Instead, you should have references. You definitely should have people that you have reached out to and said, hey, I'm applying for X job, and should I need a reference, can I call upon you? You want to get their permission first. You want to put them down on your document. And then when you get far enough in the interview process that the hiring organization says, hey, we'd like to check some references for you. Can you provide us with a list of names and phone numbers or email addresses, that you have those readily available to provide to that hiring organization. I recommend having at least 3 to 5. I also recommend you doing a variety. Have a supervisor that will be able to provide a resume. If you're only going to have 3, have 1 supervisor, have 1 peer, and if you had anybody that ever reported to you, have somebody that reported to you. If you have never had direct reports, then have 2 peers or have 2 supervisors, but always have at least 3 references that you can provide. It could also be a pastor. It could be a mentor. There's a lot of different ways that you can get references. And so, but always you want to have those on hand for sure, but don't put them on your resume. How many years of employment history should be included on your resume? We've already talked about this, but the last 10 years. So definitely make sure you have at least the last 10 years of work history on your resume, if that's applicable. Again, if you've only worked in the workforce for 7 years, then have 7 years. Next is, what should I review on my resume before submitting it? The easy answer is everything. You want to make sure that your resume is as sound as possible. You want to make sure that it is comprehensive. You want to make sure that the words and the sentences make sense and that you didn't miss a word somewhere or you didn't miss punctuation somewhere. You want to make sure that your formatting is proper throughout and consistent throughout the document. So remember when I showed you, you've got certain things that are bolded, certain things that might be in all caps, certain things that might be, the font might be bigger. So you want to make sure that's consistently, that kind of cadence is consistently used as needed throughout the entire course of your resume. Because believe it or not, there are some organizations and some recruiters or hiring managers that are very much sticklers for attention to detail on your resume. And again, that could be a tipping point why they select a different candidate to move forward in the process over you, because maybe you had a sentence that didn't make sense, or maybe you had inconsistent formatting throughout your document. And it's all these little things that send signals and cues unintentionally, but the reality is that it does. And especially in this work environment where it is so competitive. So many people were laid off or furloughed as a result of COVID and the impacts on the businesses that they worked for. And so companies are inundated with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. And so you don't want to have any flaw in your resume that creates the reason why you get discontinued from a process. It should be as error-free as possible. So what I'd like to do is go back to my core resume that we've already went through. And I made a couple of tweaks to this resume. They are extremely subtle, but there are things that create inconsistency from a formatting perspective. So I want you to take a moment and look at the resume and just see if you can find the Where's Waldo, in which I made a couple of small changes that create errors essentially in my document. And I'll give you a hint, it's in the professional work experience. So the first one is in the treatment of Walt Disney Company. On the very first job experience information, you'll see that the treatment of how I typed this in was in a sentence case format. So I just capitalized the first letter of each word. If you look below, Orange County Government, AT&T Long Distance and Local Network Services, I used all caps there. So that now is a deviation from a formatting perspective that somebody might catch that and think, oh man, attention to detail. In addition to that, you'll see here on the second professional experience entry, I've got the city and state, but I abbreviated the state, and every other place where I have a state listed, I spelled out the state. So again, there's not a right or a wrong way. It's just a matter of making sure that it's consistent across the entire document, because that really shows your attention to detail. Okay, so that is on checking. What I will also say about checking your resume is once you've completed your resume, walk away. Save it and walk away. Give yourself an hour, give yourself a day, however much time, and then go back and pull up that document and reread it. You'll read it with a different level of attention to detail through a different lens and make any adjustments. You're gonna catch things. I do this all the time. I worked for several years in training and development. I was writing and designing training materials, and I can tell you I had mistakes every time in my first and probably even second drafts. And I would always close the document, go back an hour or a day later, reread it, and I was gonna find either punctuation, font, capitalization, all kinds of errors that were just slight and subtle, but it would be enough to make the document look not as clean, crisp, and professional as I wanted it to. In addition to that, I would also say that once you feel you've proofed it and you don't see any other errors, give your resume to somebody else to look at, to a peer, to a mentor, someone that you trust, that you know will take the time to read through it thoroughly and carefully and give you feedback on it. And be okay with the feedback that you're going to get. I've gotten so much feedback on my resume because it's really important. Again, that's my marketing tool. I want to make sure that I'm selling myself properly and that the words that I'm choosing send the right message to potential employers for the types of jobs that I'm looking for. So the next question, should seasonal or temporary assignments be listed? And I would say yes. Anytime that you have seasonal or temporary assignments, it's good for two reasons. One, it's a really great way to show employment coverage if you have gaps between full-time positions, which has happened to many of us, especially in this environment where you maybe lost your full-time job, but okay, I went and got a job at the Gap, or I got a job at a restaurant. Yes, list that, because you know what that signals to potential employers is that, you know what? I wasn't going to let losing my full-time job that I had at XYZ Corporation get in the way of me staying in the workforce and continuing to contribute and continuing to make money to support my family. That shows your grit and your perseverance and your tenacity. And those are really important skills and that employers want in people that work for them. In addition to that, temporary or seasonal employment also shows if you have a full-time job and you're also doing a temporary or a seasonal job at the same time, that also shows, again, same thing, your work ethic, your grit, your perseverance, and how seriously you take what you're doing to create a great life for yourself and for your family. And so those are all really great things to highlight and that employers want to see in people who work for them. Next is, should your resume be updated with new accomplishments and or skills if you are still in the same job? Absolutely. Your resume should always be a current representation of your work experience and should be updated as necessary to highlight your accomplishments. So anytime that you go to apply for something, maybe if you haven't applied for anything in 6 months, you should open up your resume, look at the for the current role that you're in and what you've got highlighted there, and you might have to make some modifications and for good reasons. And it also might be totally fine and relevant the way it is, but you'll make that determination. But you should always be updating your resume so that you're providing the most current and accurate information to any potential employer. Next, are cover letters necessary? So here's what I'll tell you about cover letters. Basically, a cover letter is a way for you to kind of write a note to a potential employer that demonstrates your qualifications for the role, and you can do it in a way that is a more personal about you and your experience and why you're a great fit for their team. Resumes are typically written way more professionally and succinctly. In my cover letters, I have a little bit more of a casual tone to them, depending on the company that I'm applying for. If it's in the hospitality space, 100%. I want to showcase my servant's heart, and I want to showcase that I have an exuberant personality that really fits in the hospitality space. And so the tone of my cover letter is quite different than the tone of my resume. And that's what cover letters afford you the opportunity to do. It also shows that you're going the extra mile, and that you have a tremendous amount of interest and dedication to the role. If you took the time to write a cover letter expressing your interest and why you want to work for the company, because not everybody else does it. So again, I talked about tipping points along the way. Having a cover letter could be a tipping point for you, that that hiring manager looks and says, man, this person took the extra step to write this personal note to our company on why they're the best candidate for this job, why their experience is relevant, and why they want to work here, and what excites them about my organization. It should, in your cover letter, you should introduce yourself, you should explain why you're interested in the company, and then again, why you're the best fit for the role. So not required. I highly recommend them because I think it's a great ad, and it showcases a different side of you as well as a potential candidate for that organization. What is the best way to get an opportunity to job shadow a position you are interested in? So I've gotten that question, and I've actually allowed people to come and job shadow me as well. So I would say the first place you start is, if you're currently working, it's in the company that you currently work in. Let's say, and for example, and many times in my career, again, I worked in the restaurant industry, and I would have an hourly team member in one of our restaurants, maybe a server or a bartender or a line cook. And they would reach out to me and say, hey, I'm really interested in working in the corporate office or in human resources. Would you mind if I come and shadow you or somebody on your team for the day? So always making that network and the connection within the company that you work for currently, if you are currently employed, in the functional area where you want to work. I will tell you, at least in the organization that I worked in, it was very improbable that if somebody took the time to reach out and expressed interest in what you do, that someone would say, no, I don't want you coming in and shadowing me for the day. Because the reality is, it's very flattering, right? And people like to be flattered. And so if somebody's super interested in you and what you do, they typically take you up on that offer. So have the courage to reach out to somebody, and that also helps you build a network within your own organization. If you're not currently employed, or if the position does not exist where you currently worked, then I would say use LinkedIn to network, and after making a connection, inquire about job shadow opportunities. You can always reach out to people on LinkedIn. You can message them and just say, hey, my name is Stephanie Edwards, and I'm really interested in working in your industry, or I'm really interested in working in this field that you're in. And I was wondering if you might take 10 minutes to have a conversation with me. Again, people want to talk about themselves. It's very flattering when someone reaches out to you and has interested in you and took the time, and also had the courage to reach out blindly on a social networking space to get career advice. And so those are the places where I would start, and what I have seen people do, and with me, as they've wanted to shadow or learn more about what I did. But also during the last few months, as I've been on my job search journey, I have done that exact same thing as well. When I find a company that I want to work for, I find somebody in that company that I can find on LinkedIn, and I private message them, or I reach out to them. Do I always get a response? No, but sometimes I do. And it's about having the courage to reach out and take that step, because you might get 10 people that don't respond, but you only need that one that will. And so that's my kind of recommendation for you. And also use your own personal network, right? People in the community where you live, whether it's through your church, through, your friends might know friends of friends, right? That work in a specific company that you want to work for, or a specific function that you want to work in. So always use your networks. It's so important, and it helps you gain so much more insight and information, and build opportunities to meet people who might down the road be a future contact or potential employment opportunity. The last thing I want to talk about is just some additional resources in terms of things that you might, where you might want to go to find additional resources. So as I mentioned at the beginning of our time together, the Indeed job board, I use Indeed and LinkedIn the most when I'm job searching. And Indeed has a really great section on their website. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of their webpage, it's called Career Advice. It's kind of in the bottom left-hand corner of their webpage, clear at the bottom. If you click on that career advice link, it's going to launch you into this page that you see here. It'll take you to the Indeed career guide and what do you want to read about? And you can type in anything that's relatable to your job search journey. Do you want to find out how to write a great cover letter? Do you need a resume template? All kinds of things that you can type in here, and it will serve you up different articles and different resources that you can use on your job career search journey. So I highly recommend you get out on Indeed and LinkedIn and utilize these free resources that are out there and available to you as you, first of all, begin to prepare your resume, and then hopefully beyond that, getting the opportunity to actually speak to a person after your resume gets screened by an applicant tracking system and you get moved on to the next phase of the process to prepare for the interview. And that is what I have for you today. I really appreciate you joining in, and I hope that this information was really helpful to you in preparing you to build a great resume. And I will turn it back over to Denise to close us out.